Hello, and welcome to the Innovation Women Speak webinar series. I'm Bobby Carlton. I'm the founder of Innovation Women. Innovation Women is a visibility bureau for entrepreneurial, technical, and professional women. Our mission is to eliminate the all-male, all-pale, and often all-sale panels you see at so many industry conferences and events. We connect women with speaking opportunities, and we connect event managers with awesome speakers who just happen to be women. Innovation Women is so much more than a traditional speakers bureau. Event managers can search the database for free, and speakers pay just $100 a year to become a member. They get a profile on the platform and access to lists of speaking opportunities, as well as a number of other cool benefits. We recently rolled out a number of new features. Speakers can see how often their profile is visited. They can notify us to promote their speaking engagements, and event managers can easily create and store lists of speakers on the platform as they build out their events. And yes, that includes virtual events too. If you'd like more information on Innovation Women, check out our website. For our webinar attendees, we have a special offer of 20% off your first year. It's like coffee money. You've probably spent more visiting Starbucks. Back, of course, when we could visit Starbucks and go inside, but I digress. Before we move on, let's look at what's coming up on our webinar schedule. We have some very cool stuff. We rolled out these webinar series actually on our platform, and so you can apply to speak in our webinar series right from innovationwomen.com. This year our webinar series has a new theme every month. August theme is female founders. All of our webinar speakers are Innovation Women members. If you're interested in applying to be one of our webinar speakers, again, the call for speakers is right on our own platform. The deadline to apply for the next webinar series is July 5th. If you're already a member, keep an eye out for those opportunities in your weekly newsletter. Our next event is a really cool one. So Nancy is going to be talking about pandemic, protests, and panic, one woman's brand survival guide. So I'd like to encourage everyone to register for our next webinar. On July 8th, Nancy Youssef will be presenting, and you will learn how to inspire good in a chaotic world. You'll learn how to drive progress and profit, as well as get some tools for planting a seed for transparency. You can register for this webinar in the Attachments tab. And this is an annotated version of your screen. Below the video viewing window, there are some tabs. The default tab is Ask a Question, and you can type in a question or a comment at any time during the program. The Attachments or tabs or Links tab is where you see documents and links from today's speaker, and of course the link to sign up for our next webinar. You can download the attachments at any time during the webinar and from the recording. The tab called Rate This helps us determine what you like. We read all the feedback. The polls or tab, vote tab is where you see polls from our speaker. She'll ask a question and you can answer it right on the screen. You can also enlarge your screen to view it in full screen mode. And at any time, if you need audio help, please feel free to click on the Help button at the bottom of the screen. If we disappear, if you feel that it's frozen, you can try reloading the screen as well. Today's webinar is being recorded, so if you'd like to review it, you'll be able to. We'll send you the link after the webinar. So now on to today's presentation. With us today is Dolores Hirschman. Dolores is an internationally recognized strategy and coach and has been a remote employee and virtual business owner for more than 20 years. She helps clients clarify their idea worth sharing, design their communication strategies, and implement business growth systems. Her clients become speakers and authors and take their message to larger audiences like TEDx and beyond. She works through group coaching, workshops, one-on-one coaching, as well as public speaking. And don't forget, you can add questions to the chat at any time. So we are so excited to have you here today to join us, Dolores. I will turn things over to you.
Thank you, Bobby, so much for the introduction. And I am so excited to be sharing my insights with you today. But I so believe in your mission of having a platform to give a voice to women in all the thousands of and millions of opportunities to speak. So we're going to talk today about standing out and how do we stand out, not just in our day-to-day marketing and day-to-day speaking to promote your products and services, but also when you decide to present yourself to speak, whether you do it through the Innovation Women platform or however you approach a meeting planner, how are you the one to be selected? So to some extent, many of us feel like one more apple in an apple cart, right? And if you are a coach, an accountant, or any kind of service entrepreneur, many times we might feel that we have nothing special to contribute. And I'm going to actually pause and ask you, are you a service business owner? I know we're going to share that question in the poll. And here's what I've learned over my career as a business owner and as a coach in communications. And that if you are one of many apples in the cart, if you're one of many people offering the same service, there's two things that you want to be aware of. Number one is that, thank God, if the problem is if the need is so large, thank God that there are many people out there. But each one of you is unique in the way you present and you bring your products and services. And I believe that people work with the right service provider. And so the presentation we're going to talk about today is going to be all about becoming that one chosen service provider or speaker for that event. That having that be the one that is picked out of the pile of applications. And I have been in this space for many years, and I believe that when we are clear on how we stand out, we are able to get that position, get that opportunity on a stage, or get that client. I have been an entrepreneur for longer than I can remember. I think I've always been an entrepreneur. And what you see on the screen is some of the companies that I've built in the last 20 years. Masters in Clarity being the one that I am working on right now. But the other four were part of my journey to the work that I do today. And I will share a little bit of the backstory of some of these as we go through the presentation. But the other part of what I've spent my time on for the last 15, 20 years is volunteering in different organizations that bring ideas forward. Many of you might be familiar with TEDx or TED. And the role of TED is really to give a voice to ideas that are, as they say, worth spreading. NextDP Labs, E4All, and Startup Weekend are three different incubators and with three different models that I worked with as a mentor and as a coach to help these startups and these entrepreneurs clarify their core idea so that they could have a chance in the market. As you know, when you're talking about a startup, many times you're talking about a company that is disrupting an industry. So they are already coming into maybe a saturated space, and they still need to figure out how do they stand out as a small fish in a pond with really big sharks or other kind of fish. But let me talk about TEDx, because in the TEDx experience, which let me just give you a few details. I ran TEDx in New Bedford, Massachusetts for 3 years consecutive. And we hosted our TEDx in the largest theater here in town called the Zeitirion Theater. For those that are local, you might know it. It's a 1,200 attendee audience capacity venue. And we would get 300 or 400 speakers to apply for the 15 or 16 slots that we offered. And one of the things I learned in that experience is how often our speakers who are familiar with their work, they're delivering their work or speaking about this work day in and day out, so they become so embedded with it that they lose the clarity of the essence of the work. And that's what I saw over time in all of these applications and TEDx. They all kind of looked the same, or they were so convoluted in the language that they use that we as organizers, and in this case, we acted as meeting planners, right? Curators, we were having a hard time getting the essence of the speaker's work enough to maybe have them stand out, and we would select them. So that is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about how do you stand out so that if you are one in hundreds of applicants for one opportunity to speak, your application stands out. So let's just jump right into this. One of the things I've learned as a business owner, especially a service business owner, is that over time, the work that I had to do became very confusing and very hard to track progress. And pair that with my experience of having all these speakers apply for TEDx with lack of clarity, I realized that I, as a business owner at the time, was experiencing the same thing that the speakers were experiencing, an absolute lack of clarity of the essence of my work. Therefore, I felt like, A, that I was throwing spaghetti to the wall every time I either spoke or presented my material online in order to attract clients, and B, I lost the capacity to understand what was my next move or where I would prioritize my time and resources. And so that's where the image that you're seeing in the slide came about. I created a methodology to keep my business moving forward in a cohesive way. And I did it in a piece of paper and with a marker, but after many years of using it to run my businesses, I realized that this is a methodology that could serve many, many, many entrepreneurs, specifically service entrepreneurs. And so the idea method, which is what you're seeing, has 9 clear layers that we must master. I call it the clarity layers that we must get clear, that we must own in order to move our business forward. And I'm just going to talk about it briefly, but today in this presentation, we're going to focus on only 3 of them for the purpose of understanding what do we need to do to stand out. So at the center of this methodology is that yellow circle, the idea. And this is when I was a curator as a TEDx organizer, this is where the speakers were failing. They were not communicating their core idea. Many of them didn't even know what their core idea was. And so the core idea, and we're going to talk about it in just a minute, is about being able to communicate the essence of your work in a very, very short sentence or in a very brief, succinct way. The next layer of clarity is your proprietary system. And this is what would separate you as a business owner from other business owners. This is your unique recipe, the unique way that you conduct your business. The next layer is the business model. We're not going to talk much about that today, but it is about how do you organize your products and services in order to scale. The next layer is products or packaging and services, packaging of your services and products. And again, it goes along with the business model. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that, but it's what is your go-to-market strategy and how you take a lead into a loyal customer. What does that journey look like? Again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. The next one is trust funnels. I don't talk about marketing funnels or sales funnels. I talk about trust funnels because I believe that when we are bringing our products and services into the marketplace, what we're doing or what we want to do is to connect with our marketplace and build trust-based relationships. That's why, that's why I love what Bobby and her team are doing. That's why speaking has become one of the best ways to grow your business, because it's in speaking that you can have a real conversation, an honest, authentic, live, in person. And I'm not pre-recorded. I'm here with you, where you can get to know a vendor or service provider and begin that journey of trusting that company. And then there's 4 layers of clarity that are underneath, but by no means are they less important. Actually, they're the opposite. They're critical, and they're underneath because they're at play in one way or another throughout the exploration of the other 5, if you want, colorful layers. So it's about the market, and it's about the clarity around who do you want to be a hero to, who is your audience of all the people you want to serve. Even though I know many of us can serve anybody, it's important for us to select who do we want to take a stand for and target that market and communicate to the market specifically. Then there's company mindset or your mindset, and it's do you believe you can, or are you buried in self-doubt and lack of self-confidence? And whatever you believe is what you're going to manifest. And then the other 2 is the action plan for every layer of clarity that we master in the first 5 colorful layers. We got to take action, because having clarity is not enough. Clarity has to lead to action so that we can realize the impact. And the last, but by no means least, is the vision. Is where do we want to take our work? Where do we want to see our company grow? So let's begin with the idea. I'm going to share and teach you a very quick and simple framework that I use a lot when I coach speakers, specifically when I coach TEDx speakers. But with all my clients, I help them master this statement so that then they can use it as they go out into the world. So here's what I want to talk about this. This statement is simple, and it's 2 parts that you have to figure out, which is the action and the outcome. So 2 actions, so that outcome. And if you are presenting yourself, whether it's in a cocktail party or on an application online, you want to lead with the outcome. The outcome is basically what you bring to the world. So let me give you, let me just play with Bobby and the platform that they have at Innovation Women. She said it beautifully is to give access to speaking opportunities to women so that we can have a more diverse voice out in the world. And Bobby, if you're not muted and that lands for you, just let me know, because it's fine, right?
That works.
and so if Bobby were to say, well, I want to grow my business by speaking, or I want to grow my business by just talking about it in the world, she would lead with, I give women a voice, or I'll give women the opportunity to become speakers. And so leading with the outcome will allow people to engage with what she's saying and want to ask more. In marketing, there's 2 very specific rules that most people have forgotten over time. And when I'm oldish. I mean, I graduated from university in 1986. When we still had the kind of old marketing, there was no internet. Actually, when I graduated from school from Argentina, my graduating paper was marketing on the internet, relationship marketing. That's back when nobody knew what the internet was, let alone what it would do to our marketing strategies. But this concept of marketing is the concept of push and pull, which is used very much in education as well. Push and pull means, are you as a marketer pushing your information down people's throats? Or are you creating strategies for the market to pull the information from you? And when I look at pull, what I look at is how can I create a conversation, which means a back and forth between me and the person listening. And whether it's 1,000 people listening to me or one person, it doesn't matter. It still can become a conversation. So if we go back to Bobby's example of she gets women on stages, if I'm in a cocktail party and I hear her say that, or if I'm listening to a podcast and she says that, my initial reaction is like, wow, I'm a woman, I want to speak. How the heck is she doing that? And so you start creating that hunger or that pull from the audience, and they go find their answer. So if you're in a cocktail party and Bobby says that, what I would say as an audience, I say, oh, that's amazing. I'm a woman. I want to speak. How do you do that? And so Bobby will say, well, we created an online platform, a very sophisticated online platform, so that we can match female speakers with opportunities and grow the diversity on stages. So, so it is important that you get clear on this statement. And now here's something I want to say. This is the purpose of this statement is for you to gain clarity. It's not necessarily quote unquote sexy as it is. If you were to read out, if Bobby were to go out into the world and say, to build a platform so that I can get women speakers on stages, that's factual kind of, and it's clear and straightforward, but it's not very kind of elaborated or attractive in itself. But the way that if I were coaching Bobby, that I would say to her is that once you have that statement, you have to measure every single piece of communication, every single action that you take in your business against that statement. So if we remember here in the idea method, once we have the core idea, we ask ourselves for every layer of clarity and every decision we make, are we honoring that clear statement or are we not? So the other part of the standing out on your communication, your statement, this is where you start adding a little bit of kind of color into your clear idea, and you start preparing that more marketing material, is the concept of storytelling. And let me tell you a little bit about Wawas, which was one of the companies that I introduced at the beginning. Wawas was a company that I started in 2004, and the purpose of that company was not to sell clothing in the U.S., beautiful handloom and hand-knit clothing. The purpose of that company was to help a friend of mine who had 3 children. Her husband and herself were out of work, and she was trying to make ends meet. And to do so, she had gathered a group of mothers and grandmothers, and they were doing hand-knit and handloom work in order to support their families while staying with their children. So I fell in love with the story of the project, and I brought it here to the U.S. It was called Wawas, a Women Helping Women initiative. And what we did is we brought to market some beautiful clothing, very high quality material, but the company had a story which we shared openly in all our materials, and each piece that was created had its own story because each piece of clothing had a tag, and they identified the knitter or the loom woman that had created that specific piece. And you could come to my website and read about that person, so you could connect with the person that had created that piece that the customer was buying. Now, this was in 2004. This is before social enterprise was a thing, before people started talking about it. The product was very well done and high quality, but the story attracted people to connect with the product. So it is important that you are clear on what your story is and how you're integrating it. So here's a question for you. Do you use your story in your communication or in your marketing or in your speaking? And again, one of the things that we always talked about, especially when I coach speakers or TEDx speakers, is that story is not your talk. Story is a tool you use to share your core idea, your core messaging. So I want to make sure that you are clear on that, because some people would say, okay, I have a great story, therefore I'm a great speaker, and therefore I should be speaking more often. I always ask, do you have an idea worth spreading, an idea worth sharing? And then what stories can you use to illustrate that idea? So the 3 parts to create your unique standing: your story, your value proposition or your core idea statement, and the last thing is your values. Your values is the true essence of who you are as a human being. And if you are leading a large company, it will your values are going to be reflected in the culture that you build in your company. And so whether you communicate your values by just sharing a list of values, or you communicate your values in the how you show up in the world, it's also going, that the clarity on your values is going to add a layer of distinction from other similar service entrepreneurs. So the second layer of clarity that I want to share in this presentation specifically is your proprietary system. Your proprietary system is about the unique recipe that you use in your work. I have a sister actually in Argentina. She's so cute, and she has the best Instagram, by the way. But she's a baker, and she has created a company. She's much younger than me. She's 24 years old, but she has created a company that stands out on its own. And trust me, Argentinians, we love sugar, and there's a meal that U.S. doesn't have, which we call it tea time, where we are actually eating cookies or cakes or pastries every day. And so you can probably tell that there's a lot of bakers in Argentina that my sister will be competing with. But not only are her recipes unique and taste really well, but how she presents her products to the market is unique. You could say it has its own formula. The visual photos that she takes, how she presents them in social media, how she wraps her products, how she packages her pastries is different than anybody else. And therefore she stands out, and obviously she's growing. So it is important for you to understand, how do you stand out in the actual delivery of your products and services? What makes your product different? Even though you might be solving the same problem, let's say, I'm going to pick a random kind of business. Let's say you're an accountant. What would it look like if, as an accountant, you not only just, did the accounting and bookkeeping for your clients, but you also empower them to learn how to manage their money or to read the financials? So I have an accountant, and I mean, that is not my strength suit. That's why I hire someone. And she sent me my taxes to review before we submit now. That's July, right? And I was thinking about it as I was reading it through, and I'm like, oh, it would be so helpful if she could just send a quick 5-minute video explaining what to look for and what exactly I need to focus. Because I had a lot of questions, and when I'm looking at the report on my own, it's like, well, she's not here to answer my questions. So even though you might be solving a problem that a lot of people have, and there are a lot of people solving it, you can also do it in your unique way. It's all about creating a user experience or a customer experience that is A, predictable, and B, that you can communicate that to your clients. One of the things that as a service entrepreneur I found out, and I teach this to my clients and we practice it as well, is clients like to work with people that are clear on the path that they're going to be taken on the journey that they're going to go through. And so having that clarity not only can help you share it in your applications or in your marketing material, but it also will help the person receiving that information feel safer with you. One of the things that we do when we coach speakers, oh, and by the way, I didn't share this, but in 2019, I started a speaker agency where we were actually putting speakers on stages. And I sold that company in December. I was actually sharing that with Bobby before we started. And one of the things that did so well for that company, and it's actually doing very well now that it's in the hands of another company, is that we created a very, very clear process of delivering our services. And we presented that process on the upfront to our clients. And so one of the things that we do in that process when we are working with speakers is we bring this conversation to them. Is like, what is the process that you take your clients through? And once we understand that, we help our speaker kind of reveal that in their speaker applications. And the best way to do that is to have very, very clear takeaways on the description of the talk that you present. So if you ever some forms will ask it, some forms won't, but whether the form asks it or not, I would always encourage you, have very clear takeaways so that the meeting planner knows that when they're bringing you as a speaker to their event, they're not just getting some cool content, but there's clear value added that their audiences will walk away with. So let's go to the, yes, I think you're going to get a copy of the slides, and we'll share that with, Bobby will tell you more about that. The last layer of clarity that I'm going to share with you today, again, there's 9, but I'm only touching on 3, is the concept of trust funnels. And by the way, this is my favorite image, and someone once told me that's the prettiest funnel I've ever seen. And the thing is, the way we think about sales and marketing, which we call it trust funnels, we think about it in specific moments of interaction with your market. And once you have your clear statement, your core idea, once you have the story that you're going to use to communicate your core idea, once you have your values and what do you stand for so that you can infuse that in your communication, and last but not least, once you know exactly the journey that your customers are going to take to get the results that you are promising, with all that information, then you want to create a trust funnel that brings all of this together in clear, cohesive communication strategies. Now, the trust funnel has 4 specific phases. There's a lot of layers here, and you could go deeper into each one of them, but I'm going to just broadly talk about it. I believe that the top of the funnel, which people say, call it marketing, I call it spreading your magic. Spreading your magic is basically every opportunity you have to let the world know that A, you exist, and B, what problem you solve. If you think about it, Bobby has been very generous in letting me come today and spread my magic in this room with you guys. And so this, I call it the first date. Once you have the first date, then you want to capture that attention. This is kind of the whole process of attraction, and start nurturing that relationship. How do you nurture it? By sharing your core idea, by sharing the story that brought you to this work, by sharing your values, and by sharing your unique proprietary system or journey that you would take that lead through in order to get the success that you promised. So all of these communication pieces will allow you to make you be the chosen apple from the apple cart. That's a nurturing. And then comes, of course, the closing. And here's something I want to say about the exchange of value or money. I believe that from the little sparkles of magic that you see in that image all the way to closing, there is an actual transaction happening. It just is not happening with money. It's happening with the currency, what I call the currency of trust. Let's say that you meet me right now, first date, and you like what you're saying. Some people are writing on the chat saying, will I get the slides? That means to me that whatever I'm saying is resonating and you would want more. So then if you say, okay, well then I want to learn more about my work, about Masters in Clarity, then you go and, I don't know, sign up for a newsletter. You're paying with the currency of trust. And then if one day you end up buying a product or service from a company, then you will pay with the currency of money. But I don't want you to forget that paying with the currency of trust is actually a harder transaction than paying with the currency of money, because it's like a date. You know, it's much easier to ask someone who you've been dating for many years, who you have a great relationship, maybe even living together. It's actually not that hard to ask them to ask them for marriage or do a marriage proposal, because it's pretty clear where you stand, right? But the first date, to ask for a second date, can actually be trickier. And type if you agree on the chat. Type yes if you agree with that. And Bobby, I don't know if that resonates with you. So the reason why I talk about trust funnels in this way is because part of this communication strategy, part of what makes you stand out is bringing your empathy into the conversation and being clear enough about it so that it's transparent in the way that you communicate. Again, whether it's an application online to speak at an event, or sending an email to a meeting planner to propose yourself to speak, or having conducting your social media marketing. So let me just clarify what values are and how they show up. Values are things that we might take for granted, but are intrinsic part of who we are. And I learned the hard way that when I was not clear on my values, I was not able to honor them. And when I wasn't honoring my values, I all of a sudden started feeling over time that just there was something missing in my life. I had lost my spark. So values is something that is important for us as human beings to be clear and honoring and at all times. And in your communications and your positioning and your marketing of your company, having that clarity and infusing it into your communication gives your message kind of a color or a texture that other people with the same kind of messaging or same kind of work won't have. Your values help you add color to your presentation. And now there's another thing that is important in the trust funnel, and it's consistency. Here's the thing. Remember when I said, when we were using Bobby as an example, and said, once you have that core idea, you want to measure every single piece of communication, every action that you take, as is that core idea being honored in these marketing strategies or whatever we have planned this year or not. The reason why I brought that up then, and I'm bringing it back up right now, is that the core idea will anchor you into having consistency in your messaging. Because without consistency, you cannot build trust. You'll just have a voice, but it might not be a voice that will carry through and build relationships that stay with you as a loyal listener of your message. So it's important to have consistency to build that trust. So I believe that when we're clear on our differentiating value and how you communicate it, we can stand out. And so I'm asking you to think about, and I'm going to leave you with this question: what is possible if you can stand out? What is possible if your message and your work becomes the chosen one out of the apple cart? I want to encourage you to continue doing this work, to stand out and to have an impact with your work. Thank you. And I know we have questions, so Bobby, I'm all yours.
Yeah, so this is your opportunity, folks, to pop questions into the questions tab. I see we do already have a couple of questions. And I will address also what Dolores was saying about getting a copy of the slides. We actually don't send out a copy of the slides. What we do is we send out a link to the presentation recording, so everybody sees those that is able to see the slides in the recording. And I have to echo, that is the prettiest funnel I think I have ever seen. Like,
thank you.
That is a nice funnel. All right, so we also had a question for me, which is, I'm on the IW website and can't tell if I am a member or not. Can you please advise me? Just send me an email to info@innovationwomen.com, and I will help you figure that out. All right, so our first question for you, Dolores, is can you provide some examples of how people communicate their value and their personal value proposition?
Yes. So, let me take this example of the presentation I just shared. I have 5 values. My top 5 values are leadership, adventure, beauty, not in the sense of physical beauty, but beauty as a value, family, and challenge. Those are my 5 values. So let me ask you, Bobby, were you able to see any of them in this presentation, particularly beauty?
Yeah,
in my funnel.
Absolutely, the beauty part. Absolutely. It all
so
kind of comes together.
Exactly. So it doesn't have to be something that you say. I'd never said that, but it was reflected in how I present myself. And here's the thing. I couldn't do it. Like, I think I've always had that value on beauty. I just didn't know it, or I didn't know what it meant. But when I did the work, the internal work to understand it, I was able to be more intentional about, okay, if I'm presenting, I'm going to use slides, what would honor the essence of who I am? Why do a normal or standard funnel when I can do a pretty funnel and maybe bring some humor or some gentleness or some humanity into the process of marketing and sales, which I must say, Bobby, I don't know if you feel this way, for some of us, especially for whatever reason, for women, just the concept of sales and marketing might mean a dirty word.
That sounds good. One of the questions we have here is, what if the type of work I do is very customized to each client?
Yes, and that's a question that I hear a lot when we are trying to figure out, do I have a recipe that stands out? And the truth is that in order to scale, and this is more of it's kind of a standout question, but it's more of a scalable business question, and it's, in order to scale a business, you must understand what is the common denominator experience that you take your customers through, even though they might all be unique, or they might all be unique in the results that they get, because ultimately the client might get a result that they need. But over time, you'll learn that even though each experience is unique, there's a process that you're taking them through that repeats. And once you understand what that process is, you're able to communicate that process up front with the client in order to make them feel safe when they begin working with you. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Our next question here is, did your story help determine your top values?
That is a great question. And yes, but here's how it works. And I'm going to make a story on this, but you know how sometimes we need a mirror to see ourselves? Or I always used to use this metaphor that we can't give ourselves a good haircut, right? Although that is true, I no longer can use that metaphor because my mom, who is in Argentina, and she's in quarantine, and they're very strict about quarantine down there, she literally just gave herself a really good haircut. So I'm going to have to come up with a new metaphor. But in answering the question, can your story reveal your values? Absolutely yes. But what I would suggest is have someone listen to your story and pinpoint your values, because it's very difficult. Unless you write it down and you do some work, it can be hard for you to figure that out on your own in your own story.
Gotcha. So the next question is, I lead a large company. This is not coming from me. So how relevant is my own story as a founder?
Absolutely critical, because it's when we lose the story of our beginnings, no matter how big we get, we lose the essence of the reason for our existence. It's important for your company, even if you are very, very small right now. I wish if that's what you want in your life, to go big so you can have a larger impact, right? And so infusing that story in the culture of your company and allowing the team and kind of the legacy team, even if you maybe move on, to continue with the core story of how you started, it's an important element of how helping your brand continuously stand out.
Okay. Our next question here is, how can I share my story without it becoming too personal?
That is a good one. There is a line there. and everybody has their own boundaries. But I think it's important to be willing to be a tiny bit vulnerable when you're sharing your story. Nobody wants to learn from someone that has never suffered, or so they say. Or nobody wants to learn from someone that have never overcome any challenge, or so they say. What I mean is, you must show your human side and what has been a little bit of what has been your journey, and you don't have to go into details, but you have to share your journey for people to be able to meet that journey. Because remember, and 59% of you, I think, answered that you are a service entrepreneur. If you're a service entrepreneur, chances are part of your work is, or the work you do today, is a consequence of a journey you've gone through that you ended up in doing this work. So sharing bits and pieces of that journey is important to create that empathy and connection, because that's probably where your potential clients are. They are in the before of you while you are in the after.
Okay. And we have another question here. How would you handle a topic that most don't want to discuss? This person plans custom personalized joyous celebrations of life as an alternative to funerals.
I think that is a great question, and I think that you do it with elegance, and you understand that the person that doesn't want to hear it from you is also probably not your ideal client, because there is a big jump between planning a funeral and planning a celebration of life. And there's people who will never understand the concept of celebration of life because they insist in, or they can't see past the grief of the loss. And so I think this is actually an interesting question, because in some ways, how you communicate that and discuss this will also determine, will self-select your ideal client. And I believe that if you have the courage to go right into this conversation, even if it's uncomfortable, you're going to find a much richer and honest attraction of your ideal clientele than if you kind of dance in the edge of this conversation. The riches are in the niches.
Very neat. All right. So to wrap things up, any last tips, advice that you can offer folks?
Absolutely. I think if you are in this webinar right now, it's because you have a message that you want to stand out. And I want you, A, to celebrate you for it, and B, to help you understand that clarity is like happiness. You never arrive to clarity and stay there. Clarity is the exercise of getting yourself out there on a consistent basis and revealing what needs to happen next. So don't ever get discouraged if you feel that you are a little bit lost or that your message is not clear. Just keep on going out there, and just the exercise of being out in the world will help you gain that clarity that you want and need.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dolores, for joining us, and thank you all at home for joining us as well. Don't forget to leave us feedback in the feedback tab, and we'll see you all next time. Have a good day.
Thank you.